Hey Legacy community, this is Terramaster back again. Today I have for you the Yugioh Legacy June Speed Duel Highlander Tournament Top 8 Deck Breakdown. As always, the link to our Discord will be in the description below. The link to watch all the top 8 Highlander duels, a playlist, will be in the description below. The link to the Tetra Speed Duel Discord will also be in the description below to this video, because I want to go ahead and get this video up before Tetra is hosting a Highlander Speed Duel tournament of his own on his Discord today. And I just want to give everybody a chance to watch this video before you have to finalize your deck submission for that tournament if you're entering it. So Highlander format basics real quick is 25 cards in your deck, no copies, one of each card. You're not allowed a side deck, but an extra deck is allowed. Let's go through the skill breakdown here really quick. You have 3 Cocoons of Ultra Evolution, 3 Inner Conflict, and 2 Twisted Personality was the top 8 of our tournament. No real surprise there, because these are the 3 best skills in the game right now, and they're all fairly equally represented here. So without any further ado, let us go on into what I made, which is a really cool list of all the staples in this top 8. So any card that was in 4+ decks, I've qualified as a staple, and that's because it's not a card that just comboed with one skill, because there's only 3 of a skill at maximum, and it's also in at least half the decks. So for the staples, we have your strong beater monsters such as Charging Gaia, Gearfried the Iron Knight. You have Command Knight, which is strong defense, powers up your other warriors, and can also protect itself as long as you have another monster. Very solid card. You have your 2 Monarch staples, which are seen in a lot of decks, which is Dark Ruler Hades for its stats, as well as its ability to stop the effect of any monster it attacks. You have Gap for its, stats, and then its ability to get powered up by all the other fiends you may have in your hand, such as Hades, such as Midoriya, Sphere Kuriboh, and also Gap's ability to put pressure on your opponent, since as long as Gap is on the field, they cannot have monsters in defense mode, so you're constantly pressuring to run over something and do damage to them. Then we have Golden Ladybug, which since this is a resource game, Golden Ladybug can be very beneficial. Highlander format becomes a long duel usually, so Golden Ladybug giving you 500 LP per turn can be very, very useful. We have Hyper Hammerhead, very versatile card, can serve as removal and or a halfway decent beater, as well as it can bounce a monster with high defense back to your opponent's hand, giving you board control, even if only temporarily gives you tempo. Then you have Manderbug, which is solid monster removal, as well as an insect for Cocoon, which I forgot to mention for Golden Ladybug. It's an insect for Cocoon recycling, if you want to use it for that. And then you have Midoriya, once again, very good monster removal, except this time instead of Manderbug being a flip effect, it also has it's not a flip effect, and it also has the ability to have a halfway decent attack power if you can get 1200 damage in if your opponent's open or going to be. Then you have Sphere Kuriboh, one of the best attack blockers, I guess, in the game. It's a hand trap, and so all this back row hate that you see here on the screen, as well as there's other things like Night Beam being played, none of that back row hate can stop a Sphere Kuriboh. The only thing that can stop a Sphere Kuriboh that's relevant in the meta is something like Dark Red Enchanter or Twisted Personality's 2 counter effect. But even then, Sphere Kuriboh has protected one of your other cards from being discarded. So it always serves some kind of purpose. And as for Midoriya and Sphere Kuriboh, they both also provide the added benefit of being fiends for Gap, like I discussed before. Zombina, very good, very generic card, has been good in speed duels for a while because it brings back any of your level 4 lower monsters except Zombina from the graveyard. So it's very generic, can be used with any of these staples level 4 lower here, including a removal monster like Hammerhead or Midoriya, or just a beater like Gearfried, or if you need defense, Command Knight, like whatever you need, as long as you have it in your graveyard, and as long as Zombina is destroyed, no matter how it's destroyed, Zombina can get that back for you. Then you have Double Cyclone, Now I'm going to talk about Double Cyclone, Dust Tornado, and Wild Tornado together, as these are all part of the intense amount of back row hate in the format right now that leaks over to Highlander, and that's just because there's so many like powerful traps and things like Parasite, Paranoid in the game, and you'll also see a couple of Blast Spheres. So many things like that these back row hate cards just straight up counter right away and make you not have to worry about them. Also, Double Cyclone can combo really well with the Wild Tornado, so that's why those two were frequently played together. And then you have Mask of the Accursed, which in a format with not a lot of like straight up removal can be very good to lock a monster down and also put pressure on your opponent with the burn. Let's go to what's actually very good removal, is Offerings to the Doomed, which is one of the best removal Speed Duel cards in the game, and very versatile. You can use it on your turn as a quick play from your hand. You can set it face down and essentially it becomes a trap card. So very versatile, very good card. Removal at almost any time. Target one face of monster on the field. Pop it right away. Dust Tornado, more back row hate. I already talked about that. Floodgate Trap Hole is similar to Mask of the Accursed, except it flips that monster face down permanently, so you have time to figure out how you're going to deal with that monster, and you don't have to worry about a simple back row hate card countering your Mask or Nightmare Wheel. You have Kunai with Chain, which is a very versatile card as well, has been good in Speed Duels for a long time. Kunai with Chain has two effects, so it can block an attack, put an opponent's monster into defense, as well as give your monster, one of your monsters, 500 attack points, as well as also an equip spell. And we saw in one of the matches that particular thing where it turns into an equip spell came in very handy. And then we have Michizuri. Which again, in that format with not a lot of direct monster removal, serves as that direct monster removal. Sure, it has an activation condition, but then as a trade-off, it doesn't have any after costs like Offerings to the Doom does. Nightmare Wheel is a power-crept Mask of the Accursed straight up. It's spell speed 2. It can target a face-down monster. It is straight up power-crept Mask of the Accursed. Same thing, pseudo removal. Skill Successor is a first you'll see of a trend in a lot of the decks, which is an emphasis on attack points. Since this is a format where a lot of battle was going on, the players decided that attack points would be very important, and they were right about that. In that, as you can tell from Charging Gaia and Zoma, let me mention really quick, being in all top 8 decks, attack points were very important, and they are two of the strongest statted monsters, non-tribute in Speed Duels. So Skill Successor could be a very good card, as it can win you those attack point battles twice that you otherwise might not win. Then you have, I've already talked about Zone of the Spirit a little bit, in that it was in all 8 decks, but it was in that its stats, and also it's a special summon. In a format right now which is still relatively young, so we don't have a lot of special summon capabilities, Zoma being a generic special summonable card is very good. And then not to mention the added bonus of the ridiculous burn effect, which is just like insane. Like, it's already 1800, so anything that destroys it, if it's in attack mode, has to be at least 1800. And a lot of these monsters that people are running are relatively strong, so like even if a Command Knight kills it, you're still doing 1600 damage to your opponent. And let's move on to looking at the decks individually, as I really quickly talk about some of the unique cards that the decks had. Not on the staple list, so Blaze went ahead and put in Blade Knight here as one of his beater warriors. Blade Knight has been really good in Speed Duels for a while. I think it's sort of not that good anymore, but it was good in those warrior control decks. Blaze also has a lot of like a small fiend package here, where he does have your staple fiends, but he also has stuff like Dark Druid, which also again is focused on attack points. He has something like Mask of the Darkness, which is in a back row heavy format. Your traps are a good thing to recycle. And then obviously he has your staples like your Nudorius, your Kuriboh, and your Monarchs. And then all goes into the boss monster, which is Dark Necrofear. Oh, he also has Gilgarth. I didn't notice it because it was a normal monster. We don't have those. But he also has that. Yeah, so he's got 6 fiends here, I believe, to potentially remove for Dark Necrofear. Which is not bad, but it can also potentially break. But as always, I do respect the spice, my boy Blaze. And his next non-staple card is Blast Tail by Tribute. Now this is basically just a hard counter to the staples, the Tribute staples that he anticipated would be in the format. Since there's no side deck, very good there. And then the other traps to talk about are Prideful Roar. So again, it's an attack point focus card. Prideful Roar gives you the additional bonus of doing damage calculation rather than damage step. So it's after damage step, so Prideful Roar, as long as your opponent doesn't have a Prideful Roar 2, will be the final card that determines the attack points. Then there's Forceful Checkpoint, which is a very good card in Speed Duels, or at least was in the Trials format where Moth was dominant. People will try to take the Moth out of your hand before you could use it when you attacked with one of your other monsters. The Forceful Checkpoint can still be really good in that it could negate an attack and it could take your card from your opponent's hand. Windstorm similarly has been a very good card in Speed Duels in the past, and it can block multiple attacks if all the monsters are in attack mode. Let's move on to our second deck here really fast. Top 8, Philly. And the cards I want to point out here that I haven't already talked about are the two Amazoness monsters. So you have Amazoness Sage, which is just an additional back row hate, which is really cool because it's a warrior, so it synergizes with something like Command Knight. And then it has the ability to, as long as the attack goes through and it's still on the board, at the end of the damage step, you can destroy a spell or trap card that your opponent has on their field. So that's really cool because they didn't activate it before. This effect activates during the damage step, so they can't activate most of their cards. So as long as the attack goes through, they're pretty much going to lose one of their back row cards if they have any. So that's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool thing of back row hate. Then you have Amazoness Training, which is kind of like graveyard effect monster hate in a way. It hates on things like Newdoria really well, in that it puts the monster back to the bottom of the deck. So like Newdoria does not activate until it is sent to the graveyard, as you can see there. So Training can be really good for things like Newdoria, and if it's powered up for something like Zombina, to get those cards out of your way without having to deal with their graveyard effect. The next card I want to talk about here is Golden Ladybug. So I think this was a staple. My bad, guys. The next card I want to talk about here that I haven't talked about already is Twister. Again, a more back row hate. So Feli really went all in on the back row hate, anticipating a lot of trap cards, and he wasn't wrong. Some of these decks do have a lot of trap cards, and Twister, now there's an upside and downside to this depending on who's playing Twisted Personality. So if your opponent is playing Twisted Personality, then Twister can help them, but if you're playing Twisted Personality, then Twister ends up helping you as well as potentially destroying one of their back row cards. Feli also valued the 3000 wall that Metal Reflect Slime can become. Since Moth is not as prevalent and as frequently summoned in this format as it is in the regular meta, Metal Reflect Slime becomes a lot better in that it can block almost any attack that doesn't come from the Moth. So that's really good. Then it can give you tribute fodder or whatever you need. And then the last card, there's no last card to talk about. Let's move on to the next deck really fast as we go to Minty. And as we look at Minty's deck, the cards I want to talk about are Amazoness Swordswoman, very solid card, halfway decent stats. It's a warrior, synergizes with that Command Knight. And it also does battle damage to your opponent. So if they have a strong monster in defense or that really strong boss monster on the board and you want to swing into it, it combines with your Half Shut, which is another card I want to talk about, which again does a lot of things with the attack points. The only difference between Half Shut and a lot of the other attack point cards are Half Shut will protect whatever monster you target from being destroyed by battle, but that way it does go a long way into protecting your monster, or also comboing with Amazoness Swordswoman so that you can get in big damage. Then you have Black Stego, which I really like. If this attack position card is targeted for an attack, you change it to defense mode. So it's almost always got 2000 defense while it's face up on the field. If it's face down defense, obviously it's got 2000 defense. It's really cool, really versatile card where it can attack when you need to for 1200, but it always has that 2000 defense, so they can't really attack into it with something weaker than 2000. So really cool there. Then we have Dark Red Enchanter, which, like I've talked about, this format is really resource intensive, so whoever has more resources is most likely going to win the game. So Dark Red Enchanter is really good in that it can immediately take a resource from your opponent's hand. Don Zalug is similar in some way, where if it manages to do damage, it can take a resource immediately from your opponent's hand. So, and it's also a warrior, so it gets boosted by Command Knight. Then we have Old Vindictive Magician, which is really just like having two Man-Eater bugs, and since Minty is not playing Cocoon, Man-Eater bug being an insect isn't really all that relevant. Then the next card I want to talk about, I already talked about half shot, is Shard of Greed. So Minty really went all in with, as you can see, with the Dark Red Enchanter, with the Don Zalug, and with the Shard of Greed on the resource-based game here. And that Shard of Greed turns into a Pot of Greed and gives you a +1 over the long term, so after 2 turns. So it's really just for that long game, for that war of attrition, for that war of resources you have going on. Then you have Jar of Avarice, another card for that war of attrition, for that war of resources, where you recycle 5 of your cards and have a chance of potentially drawing your best cards for a second time. Very good stuff here with the focus on the resources. Then we have Security Orb, which serves as both an attack blocker and a bait trap because there's so much back row hate in this format. So something like that Amazoness Sage we saw destroys a Security Orb. The Security Orb will trigger and destroy that Amazoness Sage right back, or any other monster on the field. And then the last card I want to talk about, which is kind of spicy, is Time Machine. Time Machine brings back any of the monsters that were destroyed, so that can be really cool, especially if you combo it with something like Newdoria. Imagine Newdoria going to the graveyard, activating, popping a monster, and then you activating Time Machine to bring Newdoria back. Something like that combo can be pretty cool, so I do really love the spice here in Time Machine. Let's go on to our final top 8 deck here, as I didn't want to make the video longer than 10 minutes, so I'm going to, 20 minutes, sorry, so I'm going to try to go a little fast here. Cards I haven't talked about yet are the Insect Package. So really quick, you have your 2 Insect Searchers, which will primarily be used to search for Parasite. You have your other insects like Golden Ladybug and Man-Eater Bug in case you need to recycle early once they've been sent to the graveyard. Then you have your Parasite Paranoia, which obviously helps you summon either a Perfectly Ultimate Great Moth, and since you can't have a second Moth, helps you summon your Metal Armored Bug, which is also a fairly big beater, although not 3,500. That's the Cocoon package. There's no other really monsters I want to talk about, so let's talk about Bashing Shield, which again, it's that emphasis on attack points. 1,000 attack points can be a huge deal in a format like this where there's a lot of battle going on. Another card I want to talk about here is, oh no, actually I don't want to talk about any of the other cards. Perfect. Let us go on to the top 4 as we get into Shimakaru's deck. Let's see what the top 4 brings for us. This Blastsphere I haven't talked about yet. Blastsphere is another great set monster effect where if they attack into it or anything except a Gearfried, of course, as Gearfried is immune to it, it will go ahead and attach itself to that monster. Now, while Blastsphere doesn't work on staples in this format such as Gearfried and Gap, since Gap will go ahead and force flip it, it will work on even something like Hades. Since Hades doesn't destroy it, Blastsphere attaches itself to Hades immediately, and you're putting pressure on your opponent to do something about Blastsphere or take damage equal to that monster's attack. Another card I want to talk about is Yomi Ship. It's kind of just a non-targeting Newdoria monster removal, not much to say there. Another Shard of Greed, nothing else to really talk about here, so let us go on to Arrow Senin here. And let's see what spice there is here. Oh yeah, there is a good amount of spice in this deck. You've got Dark Triceratops, who gives you plenty of spice. He opted to run this card because in addition to benefiting from his inner conflict, see, he has 3 Monarchs to ensure that he has more likely a good use for his inner conflict early on in the game, because he will draw one of these Monarchs more often. And he chose this to be his 3rd Monarch, which is really cool, because piercing damage can be really good, especially with a lot of low defense effect monsters like these 2 that people are typically running in this format. So I really like that choice there. And then Dekoichi, solid, reduce that 25 card deck potentially to a 24 card deck by drawing a card. Also, if it survives a turn, it's a 1400 beater. maybe tribute fodder, whatever you need. Then another card I haven't already talked about. I think Gilgarth, he doesn't have Necrofear, but he only had it in here because he wanted an extra 1800 beater. Night Beam for additional back row hate instead of like something like Twister. A decent trap hole, more attack point focus. A monster summoned, you cut its attack in half. You'll have an advantage on the board going forward as long as you have a monster of your own. Let's get to the spice here though, which is Trap Jammer, which he chose as his additional form of back row hate, since even something like Zoma or Nightmare Wheel are usually used in the battle phase. So that's really cool. It'll negate the majority of traps that are commonly used in the format. Then you have Waking the Dragon, which is like the spiciest card in this deck by far. That's really cool. Now I did forget to add the extra deck, but he did play a fairly standard extra deck here of your Blue Eyes and your Joker and your Thousand Eyes Restrict, etc. So that's my bad on that. But Waking the Dragon, very spicy because of the amount of back row hate in the format. You could bait your opponent into one of the games and resolving Waking the Dragon, and then you kind of automatically win that game most times. And that's really cool, giving you a big advantage in the match. Let's move on to the top 2 deck, which is Paulo NS. And right away we have a couple of Amazoness monsters. We have Chainmaster, which is pretty spicy. A few Amazoness monsters, sorry I didn't see the training. So Chainmaster is really cool because it can take a resource once again from your opponent's hand if you set it and it's a shorter battle, or you can even, under the right circumstance, suicide Amazoness Chainmaster into a stronger monster and steal something from their hand. It does have a hefty 1500 life points cost, but imagine taking something like Parasite Paranoid away from your opponent's hand. That can be like a huge game swinger. And then he has a couple of very nice piercing cards here. We're gonna have to give you a couple more spice on that. Lancer Archfiend, which can not only pierce itself, but give any of your other monsters piercing damage when they declare an attack. So that's a really cool, really versatile card, really nice effect, and it's honestly one of my favorite cards that came in these new Speed Duel sets, as is Mephist the Infernity. I wish it was Infernity. We'll get Infernity someday. Mephist the Infernal General. So this is kind of like the love child of Don Zalug and Lancer Archfiend, which grew up to be stronger than both of them, in that it does require tribute, but then its ability is piercing in addition to, if it does battle damage, you take a card from their hand and discard it to the graveyard. That is so good. Not only does it do damage when it attacks a defense position monster, it then goes ahead and robs your opponent of one of their resources. So good. Let's see, other cards I haven't talked about yet are 2 more spice cards, Ryuryoku and Supply Squad. Now Ryuryoku, as you can see here, it will take half the attack points of any of your opponent's monsters and give it to any of your monsters, allowing pretty much any monster to threaten to run over any other monster. So again, that focus on attack points of Ryuryoku is kind of like a really powerful version of that. Now it's spell speed 1, so that's kind of the weakness it has, but in terms of how much attack points it gives you, it's very powerful. Supply Squad is that resource game. Anytime one of your monsters is destroyed, you just replace that resource right back in your hand as long as Supply Squad is face up on the field. And then any other cards? Nope, no other cards I haven't talked about. As you saw, the traps are fairly common among most of these decks, which is why I kind of got really excited when I saw that Waking the Dragon, since none of the other 7 decks ran that. That was pretty cool. So as far as Isate's deck goes, there's no card I haven't already talked about here, but it just goes to show you, like, it's a very solid, very well built, very well put together deck. He knew what cards would be the best cards in the format. And he used those cards and he played really, really well. As you saw in all of his match replays, he made a lot of big plays. A couple times he did draw the right card at the right time, but then, I mean, everybody who's won a Yu-Gi-Oh game can tell you that at some point you just win because you draw the right card at the right time. But Isate played really well. This is a really solid, really nice deck. It's very well balanced too. He didn't go overboard on the traps. He does have plenty of monsters to make sure he doesn't ever really brick. Very consistent. Plenty of back row hate to go for his Moth and Bug combos whenever he sees fit. just congratulations, very well played, very well deserved to Sate, and that is it for the deck breakdown. Now before I sign off, I just want to tell you guys about what's coming up on the channel really quick, as I am already 5 minutes over the time I wanted to be. The Android format explanation, and I did a video duel with Lucas. As you can see the banner on the screen right now, we're going to have an Android format tournament, which there will even be a cash prize for. So I'm going to have a video explaining that format and showing it off. I think it's a really fun format, and we're really just doing it to celebrate the announcement of Jinzo coming to Speed Duels, which is pretty cool. I'm really excited for that. Then we have a June regular Speed Duel Highlander tournament, top 8 matches analysis video series coming up. So similar to this one, I'm going to do a top 8 matches analysis. Now I know top 8 is a lot of duels, but this will be the last tournament that I'm going to do top 8 matches and top 8 decks for. I'm going to focus on top 4 starting in the GOAT format tournament, which is the last thing I wanted to point out that we had in June. I'm going to show you the top 4 matches. So with me telling you everything to look forward to, Terramaster out.